Hello world, this is Lisa Friedrichsen, your friend and computer science professor. And in this short screencast, we're going to take the Coding Bootcamp 101 concept a little further and look at an actual coding bootcamp and break it down into the 5 parts so that you know what you need to know before spending $10,000 or more on a coding bootcamp. Let's talk about the full stack. There are only 5 major parts of the full stack of a web application. 1, 2, and 3 represent the front end, HTML, hypertext markup language, that describes and structures content. Number 2, cascading style sheets that styles the content. 3, JavaScript that helps you be interactive with the content as you click, scroll, or type on a web page. Number 4, database. That's obviously on the server side because we all need to have a central location on the server where we send and store data. Then how do you get that information into and out of the database? That's where server-side language comes into play. And that's where a lot of the confusion lies because there are so many different choices. Let's look at a typical full stack bootcamp. I chose this one from Kansas University. They are offering in a non-credit way a full stack bootcamp. It's a 24-week session starting June 12th of 2017. I'm neither recommending this or not recommending this. I'm simply using this as an example. This one seems kind of long, 24 weeks. However, in asking for the syllabus and reviewing it, you really only go to this bootcamp half time. But here's what I want to unpack. What technologies they are teaching in the bootcamp. If you're brand new to this area, all of that is very interesting to you, but it could be confusing to you because I just got done saying in the previous video that there's only 5 major parts to the full stack. So how do these technologies fit into the full stack? Well, let me show you. Here are those 15 technologies that were on their website from HTML through Git. And let's go through these. A typical full stack bootcamp on the front end side, they're pretty straightforward. They'll teach HTML, CSS to style and lay out the content. And here we're just working with version 5 and version 3, which happen to be the latest versions of those 2 technologies. And JavaScript, which also has versions, but we typically just talk about it as JavaScript. So those are the first 3 technologies that I would encourage you to learn for your full stack understanding. And I would take them in order. Because after all, JavaScript's job is to manipulate CSS and to manipulate HTML. So if you don't know those 2 technologies, it's really difficult to fully understand JavaScript. JavaScript is a full programming language. It is the first programming language that you should learn. It's sometimes called a lightweight language because it doesn't do typical things that a heavyweight language does, such as save and store files, talk to a database, those types of heavy lifting things that happen at the server. That's why JavaScript is a front-end language. It works right in the browser, and it's probably the easiest language to learn as your first language. And it's such a critical part of the full stack. There's absolutely no reason why that should not be your first programming language. If someone steers you to another language as a first programming language, it doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just that, in my opinion, the sequencing is best and easiest if you go through HTML, CSS, then JavaScript. Several other items were mentioned in KU's full stack bootcamp, such as jQuery, Bootstrap, and React. All 3 of those are JavaScript libraries. And what is a library? It's just a collection of files. And what does a library do? It's a helper. It's a resource for JavaScript. All jQuery is JavaScript bundled together in clever ways that you can access with shortcut statements. So for example, if you want to do a clever transition on a web page, you might very likely be using jQuery. But what's critical for you to understand is that jQuery is packaged JavaScript. So if you learn JavaScript well, you will naturally understand jQuery. If you learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript well, you will already know Bootstrap. If you learn JavaScript well, you will be able to pick React.js up on your own. So yes, would I put this on my resume? Absolutely. But for bootcamp purposes, I think it sort of confuses the situation because it makes you think that maybe these are brand new technologies or different things that need to be learned in parallel to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. They are not. They are simply extensions of the 3 big front-end technologies. My high recommendation is do not dive into learning any libraries before learning the base language. If you learn the base language as well, the libraries are a natural extension. Okay, so I brought up the word library. You may have heard of libraries and frameworks, but what are they? Bootstrap is often called both a library or sometimes people call it a framework. There's a lot of overlap between libraries and frameworks, but typically a library is simply a collection of files. So instead of creating your own styles, your own color schemes, you can use Bootstrap, which has already got a lot of CSS styles, and then just apply them to your HTML. A library is a collection of files, whereas a framework is typically a little bit more involved. A framework is typically a software environment that provides both libraries as well as other things, such as rules and structure, file and folder naming conventions. It might even be a piece of software such as Visual Studio that organizes your files and organizes all your work in such a way that the next guy coming behind you can understand your work. So a framework is typically just an environment you work in that everyone's agreeing that we're going to use these folders names, we're going to use these file names, we're going to use these types of connections to make our application work. So libraries and frameworks are wonderful tools, but you'll learn those naturally once you learn the languages, once you understand the 5 parts of the big stack. Let's move on. We've already figured out that the full stack front end is made of 3 parts, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And so jQuery becomes 3B, Bootstrap becomes 3C, and React becomes another 3D. What about these other parts? Let's talk about number 4. Number 4 is a database. And so in the KU listing of technologies, I found 3 things that relate to number 4, databases. They list database theory, and I assume they mean database modeling. How do we connect the tables of our database in one-to-many relationships? I also listed MongoDB, which happens to be a database as well for managing documents, and then MySQL, which is a very common relational database management system. The thing they did not list is SQL by itself. SQL is structured query language, and doesn't matter what type of relational database management system, what type of warehouse you're using. You could be using MySQL, you could be using SQL Server, you could be using Oracle. You will use this structured query language to select the data out of the warehouse and also to insert data into the warehouse. It is truly unfortunate that MySQL and SQL Server, which are both 2 warehouses, have SQL in their name, because the warehouse, the database management system, and then the language that's used to select the data and insert data get confused. No matter what relational database program you learn, MySQL is an excellent choice. You're also going to learn SQL as a side product to insert and select data from that database. Continuing on, we just have a 5th part of the stack, and that's the most complicated part. That is the server-side language. The reason it's so complicated is because you've got so many different alternatives that you can use to connect the database to a web page. KU chose 2 different server-side languages, and I've got them listed here as number 5. They've listed both Java and node.js. I'm not exactly sure why they're teaching both, other than node.js is very exciting. It sort of represents the future, and Java sort of represents the past. You might have some legacy code in Java that you need to incorporate into your web app, so that may be why they're teaching both technologies. But here's the kicker. Node.js is actually server-side JavaScript, because it's confusing to learn yet another language on the server side to put the full web app together. Why can't JavaScript do that? Well, it was never invented in the beginning to talk to a database, to save and store files, and to do the things that the heavyweight languages typically do. However, now we can, and server-side JavaScript is called node.js. And that's just another reason why JavaScript has become so important to your full stack understanding, and why it makes the perfect first language to learn, because you may be building a full stack using JavaScript on the server side through Node.js. Other things that were mentioned in KU's Bootcamp were Express.js. This is a framework for Node.js, a manner, a structure to build our JavaScript on the server side, and also Bookshelf.js, which is a Node.js library. So again, those are merely pieces of the full stack that you will naturally learn once you know these technologies well. The 2 items that are mentioned in KU's Bootcamp include the command line and Git, which is version control software. I would have listed it like this. We are offering a full stack coding bootcamp. Come learn the front end, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And by the way, we're also going to introduce you and expose you to 3 extremely popular JavaScript libraries: jQuery, Bootstrap, and React.js. On the back end, you're going to learn a lot about database. You're going to learn modeling, You're going to learn how to model and structure a database properly. And then you're going to use a couple different types of database warehouses, MongoDB for documents and MySQL for a traditional relational database. Of course, you're going to learn SQL, select and insert data out of that relational database. And on the server side, we're going to give you two Dynamite server-side languages, Java, which, by the way, has nothing to do with JavaScript other than its name, and node.js, which is JavaScript on the server side. Finally, our JavaScript can talk to a database and can save and store files. So that's really exciting. Describing this bootcamp, I would also say there are many other things you're going to learn along the way. They're not the 5 big pieces of the full stack, but they're very helpful tools, such as a command line. We'll be publishing to GitHub, a cloud storage location that uses the Git language to safely store and share our files. We'll be learning about protocols such as FTP to file transfer our files, HTTP to transfer our files over the internet. We'll be working on security from a networking standpoint, and we'll be using agile programming, software development methodologies. That would be how I would organize this information just to make it more digestible. The full stack. It's only 5 big pieces. You can do it. Thank you for listening.